Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the 14th edition of LGBT Plus at Work 2020 Business Conference from Spain, Madrid. My name is Tyler Berklasic, and I'm the president of the IE Out and Allies Club, IE's student-led LGBT Plus organization. On behalf of all of my fellow coordinators and everyone who worked tirelessly to bring this conference together, I would like to say how excited we are to share tonight's program with you. We have 9 extremely accomplished speakers from 7 different countries, all of whom share a passion for diversity and inclusion. We are grateful to have our partners, sponsors from different organizations, including our platinum sponsor, Salesforce, our gold sponsors, Amazon, Johnson & Johnson, Gilead, IE Foundation, IE Campus Life, and MyGWork, and our silver sponsor, Banco Santander. Their support has made this conference possible, and we thank them for the dedication to equality. Starting as a small gathering on IE's campus, LGBT at Work has become the longest-running LGBT plus business school event, and along with amazing partner organizations such as Ready and Less Working, it has made enormous strides to create visibility in Spain and beyond for LGBT plus people in the workplace. However, we still have so much to do, as many companies around the world still have active discriminatory policies, LGBT plus employees facing microaggressions, and the fear of many to come out. This year has been no easy task. LGBT at Work is usually a face-to-face conference in Madrid, Spain, but due to COVID-19, we made the decision to convert a one-day in-person conference into 2 days and online. COVID-19 has brought the world to face a lot of dark realities that millions of people live in daily, including the LGBT community. Our community generally suffers higher levels of violence, exclusion, stigma, discrimination, and criminalization for just being who we are. COVID-19 has enhanced the vulnerability of LGBT plus people all around the world. More so, high levels of stigmatization and discrimination in health services have removed trans and intersex people from health systems for years, which have led to delays in seeking medical care when needed. Similarly, interruptions in access to certain treatments essential for LGBT plus people, such as HIV-related medication or hormone therapy, are currently unavailable in many countries as a result of the collapse of the health system. Thankfully, organizations throughout the world have tried their best and stepped up to serve these underrepresented populations since the beginning of the COVID health crisis. We are thankful that we are able to continue with our conference in spite of COVID. We are grateful for an opportunity like LGBT plus at Work and an institution like IE where I get to be completely myself. That isn't to say all students are out, but as I look back on the moments in my life when I was in the closet, I was grateful for people and organizations that looked like me and represented me. LGBT plus people at work is more than a conversation, but a collection of people and ideas to move our world to a more equitable place for all people. And it's my pleasure.
There's a university where the people who will change the world tomorrow are being trained today. A place for those who wish to build their road to success and write their own future. An institution that empowers people who want to positively impact society. A university with all the resources you need to make your ideas and projects a reality. Where the commitment to technological immersion in education creates leaders capable of confronting the challenges of digital transformation. Where the international outlook prepares you to develop your potential to the fullest and to stand out in an increasingly global environment. Welcome to a university driven by innovation. Welcome to IE University.
Now it is my great pleasure to introduce the executive president of IE University, Santiago Anzono. Santiago is the university's president and is heading the strategy of the 5 schools comprising our university. He is also driving further internalization coupled with a special focus on developing new formats for the integration of learning and technology, consolidating long life learning projects, establishing international agreements to create learning platforms with leading universities, and setting up new programs that attract talent and further raise the levels of diversity on campus. He was the architect of IE Business School Global Online MBA program, which external publications often cite as the world's best online MBA. On a more personal level, Santiago has been the mentor behind the success of the 14-year run of LGBT Plus at Work. He has opened each of the past LGBT Plus at Work conferences, and with a good reason. Every single leadership team to organize this conference has benefited from the structural executive support for diversity and inclusion at IE University, which is hard to compare in any other European institution and around the world. So many of his mentees reported how it was a gentle push from Santiago that motivated each year a bigger, better, and more impactful conference. And now 14 years later, we can call ourselves the third largest LGBT plus business school conference in the world. Thank you for your continued support, Santiago, and we look forward to your words.
Hello, I'm Santiago Ingest, President of IE University, and I would like to welcome you to the LGBT at Work 2020 Day. This week we are celebrating something which is very important. We are celebrating freedom. We are celebrating the embracement of diversity. We at IE University, as you know very well, not just embrace and celebrate diversity, but we want to instill in all our students and members and participants this culture of respect and equal concern for each other. This week is particularly important since one of the most cherished forms of diversity is the way we embrace love, the way we envision the world, the way we want to relate to each other. And that's why the LGBTQI community is so important in our societies. I realize that we have all lived over the past months under confinement, but imagine if you live under confinement for your whole life. So unfortunately, many of our students come from countries where still freedom, liberty, respect for the way you love and the way you live is not recognized, is not respected. It's even a cause for putting you in prison. So many of our students, when they return back home, may find a very different atmosphere and environment to the one that they meet here at IE University. And we have to speak out and talk very clearly about the need of respecting others. We live in a common world where we need to change many different things. We need to embrace diversity. We need to implement lots of different initiatives in order to build up a society that is sustainable. We need to fight racism. We need to fight many different things that they may be ingrained in many different cultures, but they are not the way we want to build our global society in an inclusive, integrated, respectful, diverse way. But let's be positive today, because today we are celebrating something which is extremely positive and a reason for optimism. We are celebrating that many different people years ago started to defend their rights in a very strong way. I sometimes refer to diversity by explaining that there are two major reasons for justifying the diversity policies at businesses, at companies, at organizations. The first one is what I normally call the business way, the business case. According to this justification, businesses, companies should implement diversity policies because they promote much better results and they are actually resulting in the bottom line in more profits. This is very much evidenced by lots of papers that show that more diversity at work generate more innovation and consequently much better performance. This is the business case, which leads many different managers to implement diversity policies at their respective companies. But there's another way to justify diversity, which is the justice case. Justice is a very strong claim in order to push diversity policies at all sorts of organizations, including companies. We should respect each other, not just because it produces much better results in terms of the bottom line, but because it's a question of justice. We need to have an equal respect and concern for each other. We all deserve that respect, regardless the way we think, the way we love, the way we envision the world. So allow me just by finishing and saying that what I hope is that you enjoy very much this celebration at IE University, that you take the opportunity to discuss very openly about how to implement and to improve the measures that can guarantee this atmosphere of freedom, of liberty, of diversity, that will result in a much better society, and of course in better run companies. But I would like to finalize by thanking Tyler Klachik, who has been organizing this fantastic event. Thanks, Tyler, for a terrific organization. Allow me also to appreciate the efforts over the years of all those members who have been involved in the IE Out Club, in the LGBTQI initiatives at IE University. They all deserve this recognition, our collective recognition, because they did a terrific job in opening up an initiative that is so important for our university and for the global society. And to all of you, what I hope is that you feel strong and that you fight for your rights. Of course, you have our full support, and if you need anything from me, don't hesitate to contact me because I will be there. So thanks very much. Enjoy the celebration and congratulations.
One of the pillars explaining the activities of IE Foundation throughout recent years has been the idea of talent taking care of talent, by which IE Foundation, with the support of IE University and also the support of individual and corporate sponsors, provides scholarships to highly qualified candidates and students so that they're able to study at IE even when they don't have the full financial means. With the COVID-19 health crisis that is becoming a very large economic crisis, this becomes more important than ever, and that is why this fund has been created.
I'm lucky to be in the IE community, where I do not only get to have amazing academic and professional opportunities, but also in a place where everyone cares for each other no matter what.
It's an honor that I'll never forget. It's carried in my heart and in my mind. It's completely changed my life 180 degrees, and I'll always be thankful to the IE Foundation.
Without IE looking out for me in the way they have done, it would have been impossible for me to be where I am today and to now face the future more optimistically, as I now feel.
This summer, I'm going to be working in Nepal to develop better and more stronger social security nets, which is something I learned working in the World Bank in Ethiopia last year. Even though we weren't fully prepared for this crisis, let's be for the next one.
Thank you for making it possible.
Thank you, Santiago and IE Foundation, for your time and commitment to your students and employees. We are so grateful you have been a part of the LGBT Plus at work for so many years. Our theme this year is diversity as a catalyst for innovation. It is our mission to dive past surface-level definitions of diversity and explore its more multifaceted layers, even within our own community. We challenge our speakers and guests to not only learn more about marginalized populations, but to ingest new perspectives, apply them to our own lives, and find innovative ways to integrate new ideas into their companies' programs of inclusion. Over the past months since George Floyd's death, the world has finally had to look at the systematic racism that the United States and the world has upheld for hundreds of years, and that Black and brown people face every day of their lives. The LGBT plus community is not immune to this either. Since 2013, more than 130 transgendered and non-binary individuals have been killed in the United States. In 2019, the number was 27. 2020 has already seen more than 18 transgender or gender non-conforming people fatally shot or killed by other types of violence, the majority of whom were Black trans women. We must all do better to our Black trans community. Just because rights have been elevated for some of us over the past decade does not mean the fight for equality is over. This next video is from the ACLU and is narrated by Laverne Cox, an incredibly talented, influential Black trans woman and activist, giving a history of trans activism and the responsibility for the LGBT plus movement today.
On a hot night in June 1969, police raided the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village, New York. But this time, rather than be arrested, the Queens and street kids fought back. The riots that ensued are considered the beginning of the LGBTQ movement in America. But the movement has much deeper roots. 3 years before Stonewall in August 1966, trans people at Compton's cafeteria in San Francisco also rioted against the police. Late at night, when trans people congregated there, police would routinely harass them in their sanctuary. But on this night, led by trans women and femmes of color, the community resisted. Similar but lesser-known uprisings occurred in Los Angeles at Cooper's Donuts in 1959, and at the Black Cat in 1967, and in Philadelphia at Dewey's Restaurant in 1965. There are probably many other such events yet to be uncovered. They remind us of our courageous history of resisting institutionalized bullying and oppression. In the decades that followed, trans people largely remained in the shadows, quietly contributing to society. Our community was still denied employment, housing, healthcare, and legal protection, essentially the basic right to live. Yet even when they were criminalized by anti-cross-dressing and anti-loitering laws, our transcestors, including Miss Major, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, and Flawless Sabrina, survived. They all spent time in jail because they dared to be themselves when our society made it a crime to deviate from gender norms. But time marched forward, and so did they, passing along their survival strategies. And today, trans people are more visible than ever. Though our lives and bodies are sometimes celebrated, we remain more often targeted. In schools, harassment often forces trans students to drop out. Federal and state governments act as bullies too, now rescinding guidance to schools on how to protect trans students and passing harmful laws banning trans people from common restrooms. Epidemics of homelessness, HIV, and incarceration constrain the survival opportunities for trans women of color. The murder rate of trans women of color increases with every passing year. Rather than invest in our survival, the new administration has attempted to both literally and figuratively delete us and has ignored requests to investigate the escalating violence against us. Only 18 states explicitly and comprehensively protect trans people from discrimination. Many other state lawmakers are focused on targeting us for more discrimination. In 2017, lawmakers in 22 states introduced more than 50 bills restricting the rights of trans people. Even as these lawmakers signal that we are not worthy of protection, we persevere. Most of us have already spent years in dark places wrestling with our truths, feeling ashamed of who we are. But when we manage to survive and even to love ourselves, we are stronger than ever. Try as they might, these lawmakers cannot erase us. Our rights will be hard won, but we are winning. Our community is resilient and our history of resistance runs deep. Following in the footsteps of Flawless, Major, Sylvia, Marsha, we fight back the way they did. We take care of each other. We tell our stories, and we demand justice. Join the fight in courts, in state legislatures, in the streets, in the voting booths. Resistance is our birthright, the gift passed on from our elders. We carry the lessons of Cooper's, Stonewall, Compton's, and the many strategies that continue to give us hope and life. We have always existed, and we will continue to fight until we are all safe and free.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eddie Carrillo, Vice President of IE's student-led LGBT plus organization, Out and Allies, and it is my honor to introduce our first speaker of LGBT plus at Work 2020, Phil Opokogima. Widely known as Lady Phil, she's the executive director and co-founder of UK Black Pride, Europe's largest celebration for LGBTQ plus people of African, Asian, Caribbean, Latin American, and Middle Eastern descent. Lady Phil's over 20 years experience as an LGBTQ plus rights activist and anti-racism campaigner. She spent a decade advocating for the rights of workers within the largest civil service union as a lead negotiator on behalf of civil service workers, and is now the executive director of Kaleidoscope Trust, an LGBT plus charity that works to defend and uphold human rights. She is also a patron for Albert Kennedy Trust, Diva magazine columnist, and public speaker focused on race, gender, sexuality, and class. She is named one of the top 5 on the World Pride Power List. And without further ado, I present you Lady Phil.
Thank you very, very much, Eddie, and thank you very much for allowing me to be in this space. And I say in this space because we are many of us are at home or in offices where we're able to work. But that wonderful introduction makes me feel like you've given me my whole talk already. So really what I want to focus on for these next 15 minutes is just a bit about what UK Black Pride is, you know, the genesis and the origin of it, and also let's make the parallels and comparisons to what's happening in the Black Lives Matter movement. And given that that wonderful, very powerful and very moving clip narrated by Laverne Cox has really touched me to my core. And I would probably like to end on, you know, what does real allyship mean to us? And what could we do within our workplaces, our companies, organizations, society at large, and just within ourselves as being good allies? So UK Black Pride, an amazing organization. And of course, I'm slightly biased because I'm the co-founder and executive director, but it was really set up to look at what representation was and is, and what inclusion really feels like for Black communities. And when I say Black, it's meant in its political context of the Africa, the Asian, the Caribbean, the diaspora, those of indigenous populations as well, anyone who sees themselves as a person of color. And in 2004, when I was running a Black lesbian feminist organization, and just for anyone who isn't aware, although I am an out lesbian, I'm Black, in case you're not clear about that. It's meant to be a joke, because what we do see is when we're in an audience setting, people kind of laugh at that, but obviously it's just me here by myself. But when you look at UK Black Pride and its origins, we recognize that we were not necessarily being seen in the wider Pride movement. We were not being seen in LGBT mainstream activities. So it really felt that there was an erasure of Black and brown bodies that were there to be celebrated, as well as talk about the aspirations and our goals and what we felt challenged by way of, you know, the discrimination that touches our lives on a daily basis. So with that, in 2005, I went to a group of what I would see as senior leaders within our LGBT plus movement. And I said that it's really important that we look at the intersections of how our lives meet. We look at being Black and the racism that we feel, our sexual orientation and the homophobia, the biphobia, the transphobia, that our religion, faith and belief, and how Islamophobia absolutely riddles some of our communities. And we also look at gender and how sexism plays a big part in how we navigate the world, alongside the misogyny and the patriarchy that exists. And I was really disappointed and very, very upset by how a group of people who are supposed to understand marginalization, discrimination to a greater or lesser degree, they were completely upset, and quite vehemently upset, that a Black Pride would want to start in this country. And I say in this country, in the UK. You know, I like to say I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams. So when you understand that you're being told no, you push forward, because this isn't about me in the here and now. It's also about the generations to come after. So you have to do all you can to fertilize, to cultivate the land, so that we continue to resist laws and legislation that completely brutalize our bodies and our minds about who we are as Black people. And I make no apology about talking about racism. I say this, I talk about fragility, I talk about, white supremacy in a way that it's supposed to leave you feeling uncomfortable. It's not supposed to make you feel guilty, because guilt serves no purpose. It is ever so self-indulgent. So it's about thinking differently, challenging your mind about what you have to do differently within your workplaces. So we fast forward and we started 200 people at the very first Black Pride, and 2019 we are at 10,000 people. People who have come together because there's a shared commonality. People who have come together because it's about chosen family. People who have come together because they're combating loneliness and isolation within so many different spheres of their lives. UK Black Pride is not just a pride, it is a movement that looks back at its history from 1969, from the first Stonewall riots that took place about police brutality and our trans, non-conforming, gender fluid sisters and siblings and femme lesbians who said, we're not going to stand for this. Then you look at today's society with what's happening with Black Lives Matter and the fact that, you know, and I give a very quick trigger warning that I will talk about death, that George Floyd, for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, was brutally murdered in cold blood. And he could have been my brother. He could have been my dad, my uncle, my friend, my nephew. And that is unacceptable, that we are in 2020 and still the discrimination and the laws which do not protect us as Black people fuel and continue to intensify on so many different levels. So when you look at why UK Black Pride was created, it was created not to be a separate entity, but really to challenge the homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, and also the structural and systemic racism that exists within our society and also internally within our own LGBT plus communities. It has taught us so many great lessons about how we look at things from an intersectional frame and a lens. And by intersectional or using the term intersectionality, we have to understand that intersectionality is a way of breaking down those barriers that have often oppressed people. So if you are not talking about racism in the workplace, you are erasing Black people from the way in how they navigate the spaces. If you're not talking about gender and sexism and transphobia and sexuality and so many facets that make up those protected characteristics, there will undoubtedly be an erasure of the work that you wish to do around diversity and inclusion. And as this is about diversity and being the catalyst of innovation, I think it's really important that we take stock about how we do things differently, working with your staff networks to really form some synergies between whether it's the Black or the BAME, which is Black and Asian minority ethnic networks that you have, and how do you come together in a way that really is meaningful and is about engagement? And those networks can do a lot around looking at its own theory of change about how to really ensure inclusion in the workplace, that people feel confident, they feel empowered, and they also feel liberated. My journey of getting to where I am today as being the executive director of Kaleidoscope Trust and also UK Black Pride has come with many challenges of facing ongoing racism. And I always say to people, it's like, I feel like I'm constantly busy being Black, busy being part of the LGBT community, busy being a woman, busy being so many different things and having to speak up and speak out. And when having to do that, it's tiring. And this is where we start to talk about what allies can do better and what you can do in your organizations better. Now, allyship should never be performative, should never be tokenistic. It must be about real, meaningful engagement. So an ally or the allyship shown through organizations must be about the challenging and the fighting for equality and justice and the freedoms and also inclusion within the workplace and society by listening, by not putting yourself front and center, by also taking stock and recognizing that, those who have privilege and access and power to make decisions, it's about how they use that privilege to help elevate and amplify others to be able to access the same things they have. In my day-to-day work, I work with the most amazing human rights defenders across the globe, where we work to uphold human rights. And I see the parallels again of what's happening with them around COVID-19 and how they have to navigate particular colonial era laws. And I say, how do I use my privilege? How do I use my access? And it's about using my platforms to amplify and raise their voices in many different ways, whether I am negotiating, liaising, or working with high commissioners, diplomats, MPs, parliamentarians, to really, really bring the issues to light. And I really want to say to you, because I know that I don't have that much time, and I'm trying to keep track of time before Eddie comes and tells me, or Eddie or Tyler tells me, I gave you 15 minutes. This is a real opportunity with LGBT at work to not just be performative, but to really live the values of equality, freedom, and justice. To recognize that your struggle has to be my struggle, and my struggle has to be your struggle. We cannot come back here in 2 years, in 3 years, and still be talking about the same things. There is a lot that I'm feeling hopeful about, but there's also a lot that I'm pained and aggrieved about, because being a Black African lesbian woman in a workplace, in society that doesn't value or often respect me, why we talk about Black Lives Matter, and I say all Black Lives Matter, we have got to really understand and do some history, do some research, and do some learning about what is important to put at the forefront. Equality and diversity and inclusion must be taken seriously and cannot be the last thing on the agenda when leaders are talking about potential propositions or things that will change the trajectory of your workplaces or your organizations. It must be woven and seemed like it's seamless throughout the fabric of the workplace and society. And we only do that by coming together with a unified voice, in a collective way, in a way that we turn up the volume on society, making it absolutely impossible and difficult and ever so challenging for anyone to turn the volume down on us. Now is not the time for waiting to see how things pan out. Now is the time for action. Now is the time for meaningful engagement. Now is the time for allies to really put their best foot forward and say they will not stand for any form of racism, sexism, misogyny, discrimination against young people, differently abled or disabled people. This has to be about every form of discrimination or inequality that touches people's lives, because we are not free until everybody's free. And I leave you with a quote, which is something my mother has always said to me, and it sits very deep within my core, because as a mother of a 25-year-old woman, and yes, I am a mother of a 25-year-old, it is about the next generation for me. And she says to me, you do not inherit this land from your parents. You borrow it from the next generation. So it means we have a duty of care to make sure, as I said earlier, we cultivate the land, we create the environment in which we wish to hand over to that next generation, so they do not have the same struggles that we do. But we also stand up, we shout out, or we sit down and we speak up and we speak out about inequalities that are facing people. So I'll end there, but I really want to say thank you to IE University. Thank you for allowing me to be here and be in this space. And please support the many different organisations who are doing the work at grassroots level, like UK Black Pride, to really look at how we celebrate, protest, and how we look at our aspirations and goals about how we move forward. So I send solidarity to you, and I hope you all enjoy the few days that you have of LGBT at work. Thank you very much, Tyler and Eddie and the rest of the team.
Thank you so much, Phil. We couldn't be happier to have had you open up the conference, and I personally apologize for that pesky 15-minute limit. We do have one question from the audience today. The question is, I have never been an activist before. How can I start? What's the first thing I can do to start my journey to activism and allyship?
Well, that's such a wonderful question that somebody from the audience has asked. I think that within ourselves, we're all activists because we're all advocating for change. But if you really have a cause that you're passionate about, that you are interested in, whether it's around environments and how, climate change impacts on women or trans people in, say, the global south, do some research and find out a bit more about how you can get involved, whether it's signing a petition, whether it's actually joining a group that is lobbying or campaigning for these things, but also make sure it feels like it's a safe space for you to be in to talk about particular issues in which you're passionate about that may have a real lived experience or a shared commonality to the life that you lead. And I think the point about allyship, allyship has to be meaningful, but allyship is also very situational. And with that, I mean, sometimes you may have to be at the center and at the front of me as a Black woman that may be facing racism and sexism, so that I feel shielded when I'm too tired or too weak to carry on because of how draining it is. There's other times where you'll have to take stock and just listen and hear exactly what I or others will need. Then there's the other aspect of making sure you use your privilege in a way to amplify others and elevate them so that they have the same access that you do to things like housing, health, education, just the basics that everyone deserves and is entitled to. And more importantly, within the workplace, I think that companies and organizations should really think about how you recruit. If you really are wanting your organization to be more diverse and you're wanting true inclusion, you have to think about your recruitment, your policy, and your retention, and recruiting in different areas and different spaces that allows you to tap into talent, which may be LGBT and POC, which is people of color, maybe both, maybe putting that advert somewhere which is disabled people can get access to as well, and making it more accessible. So I hope that was helpful in responding to that point.
Very much so. Thank you so much one more time, Phil, for opening up LGBT Plus at Work 2020.
Good luck. Thank you.
As human beings, we are all wired for connection, and connection is defined by a deep sense of love and belonging.
Belonging, to me, means that you never have to hide who you truly are. Belonging, I would say, is a feeling of being wanted and safe in a community, even if they're full of people that are completely different from you.
Belonging for me is being part of a community like friends, family, or company, and to be who I am and feel free to do what I want.
I think everyone deserves to love who they are and be who they want to be.
Whether you're at work, whether you're at home, or whether you're walking down the street, you should be accepted for who you are.
Everyone deserves to feel like they belong in a community, and Salesforce develops that community for our employees and our friends.
No matter who you are, you can find your home here.
Being allies is an important step in creating a larger community, and that larger community is how we stay safe, happy, and how we create that sense of belonging that we all need and crave as humans.
Regardless of who you're in love with, you should be able to celebrate that and be public about it and not be ashamed or have to hide yourself.
I believe everyone should have the right to do what they want, marry who they want, be who they want, and if I can help fight for that, then I definitely want to be an ally.
It's all about support, feeling that you're part of something, and just helping everyone along, and everybody deserves equality.
There's this saying that says the queers and the LGBT folks are like butterflies. When you see them out flitting about, you know the environment is healthy.
Without friends, without family, without community and allyship, none of us would be as successful as we are. So it's important to think about who needs an ally and to show up and to speak up.
We all have a role to play on the path to equality. If we all come together and work together to show up for our LGBTQ community, then that's when we'll start to see real change, and then every person will feel like they belong.
The only point of being here is if we can all be here.
We really need allies and the support of everyone to make sure that the world is an equal place for all.
Every single movement is sparked by someone speaking out, but it gains momentum when allies join the cause. We can never forget the importance of standing with others. That's what's going to take us to equality for all.
A huge thank you to Salesforce and those incredible team members that made it happen. Hello, everyone. I am Camille Alois, Chair of the Marketing Committee for LGBT Plus at Work 2020. It is my pleasure to announce Linda Aello, Executive Vice President of Employee Success at Salesforce. In her role, Linda leads the Global Business Partner Organization in driving all parts of the employee lifecycle for the Salesforce Ohana. Since joining Salesforce in 2016, Linda has placed a focus on creating a strong and engaged culture at Salesforce that has led to recognition as a great place to work in the global markets, including the UK, Germany, Canada, and Japan. Prior to joining Salesforce, Linda led human resources and recruiting in EMEA and APAC for Uber. With nearly 20 years of experience, she has also managed human resources and development at leading fashion brands including Louis Vuitton, Jimmy Choo, and Bruno Maggi. Thank you again, Linda. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Camille. It's really an honor to be here, and I'm really grateful being here. And I was getting kind of choked up watching that Pride video. As we're in this month of Pride, and it's such a wonderful celebration. We can't quite celebrate in the same way we did last year, but thinking about how we can do that and how we can drive this forward. I had some slides to share with you today, but we're having technical difficulties. So, and there we go. I have slides. And just like that, it's magic. Where I wanted to start off with you is that from day one at Salesforce, we've been a purpose-driven organization, and we have 4 core values: trust, customer success, innovation, and equality. And this is our compass. This is your ticket to entry for the organization as well. And every employee and every leader is responsible for advancing equality, not only within Salesforce, but within the world. So we understand that as an organization, we have a privilege as well, and we have responsibility to drive impact and make business a catalyst for change in this world. And we know that this can be a really powerful platform for social change. And then, within this includes our workplace culture, advocating outside our 4 walls, and also how technology is used. We also really firmly believe that representation matters. And so we're working really hard to create a workplace that really reflects the diverse communities that we're in, where everyone feels heard, feels seen, and feels valued. Now, I joined Salesforce, and it's a company that I had actually admired for a really long time. It's a place that I knew of. I actually have a younger brother who's worked here for 13 years, and I've watched what this organization has done from the outside looking in. I am one of 5 children. My parents were immigrants, and they were big advocates for equality. My very Catholic parents, on a Sunday after Mass, I remember my dad typing a letter to the Bishop of the Archdiocese of New York around the church's point of view on the LGBTQ community and reading it out to his children. and pushing and advocating for change, and knowing that he was in a privileged position and it was his job, it was his responsibility to raise his voice up. So I talked to my team about, is it your job or is it your hobby when you're looking at something at work? And what I love is that my hobby and my love for equality gets to be my job here as well. And when we think about creating this culture of equality, it's not just the right thing to do, it's also a really smart thing. And we talk about this as being a catalyst for innovation. And it really allows us to innovate, build deeper connections with our customers, and also create a positive impact for our community. So when we think about this technology piece too, so our focus on accessibility, for example, some might say, okay, well, that's a nice thing to do. It's a good thing to do. We have a really strong ability force community, and it helps us understand the specific needs of people with disabilities. From that, we can also embed this into our product so that it doesn't only touch our own employees, but it touches all of the customers who touch our technology on a daily basis. And it also is embedded in terms of what we do in terms of our real estate, our events, and everything that we do along there as well. And we make sure that we're committed to serving and standing with all of our stakeholders for a better tomorrow. So we need to drive this all around 360. So our employees, our customers, stakeholders, society, our public schools, our environment. And for me, my experience here has lived up to the pieces that I have expected and that I'd have hoped for. And that being said, we're not a perfect organization. We have a long way to go. And what I love about us is that we stop and we look at this and we say, okay, what are we doing now? How are we measuring it? How can we be better? And how can we drive greater change? So when we approach equality at Salesforce, we really think about it across 3 areas. So it's sort of shared memories, defining stories, and representation. So let's dive into each of those a little bit. When we look at shared memories, think about it like a family album. I want to share with you some of our pictures from our family album. And these are some of the wonderful events that we've held so that we can learn from yours, so we can learn about different cultures within the organization. We can advance to the next slide. Sorry, guys, just click through. It's okay. A really wonderful Diwali session that we had with one of our ERGs. This was celebrating Lunar New Year. And then Pride. We are involved in 32 cities. We had 4,600 participants last year, and there were 13 new cities. So this keeps growing and growing. So we see the movement that this is making and the importance that it has. But it's not just people who affiliate with those ERGs or with those different organizations who take part in this. It's really a big thing about allies. And I've heard a little bit about this already today, and I really want to double down on this. And this is something that is so important. When we think about our ally practice, we talk about it in these 4 steps, and it's around asking, listening, showing up, and speaking up. And as a person who walks into a room with a large amount of privilege every day, I realize it is my obligation, every leader's obligation at our organization, to be an ally and to show up for one another. So I wanted to share with you a few examples of allyship at the organization, but then I also wanted to share with you a little bit about how we consider this journey. And it's hard. It's okay, how can I be an ally? So we think first, okay, I want to help. I want to be an ally, but I don't know how to do this. And no matter where you are on your ally journey, and you can see the journey as it goes on through here, you can just practice one of these steps and this will make a difference. And we strive to create a culture of allies who show up for one another. I have a specific ally. There are times when I have been the only woman sitting at a table of executives. And one of my great allies, a guy named J.L. Mora, is a gay man from Brazil. And he sits with me, and whenever there's a comment that's made or something that happens that we think is not inclusive, I'm an ally for him, he's an ally for me. So when it's something on the LGBTQ front, I raise my hand and I say, hey, actually, let's think about that. Can we talk about that again? And he does the same for me, so that it's not only me standing up every single time as kind of the woman having this moment, this piece, et cetera. And it's just comforting knowing that he's there, knowing that that one person is sitting at that table with me and making that difference is really, really impactful for me. I want to show you some examples of some other allyship. And this is one of my favorite, one of my favorite pictures. And this is from Pride in Hyderabad a couple of years ago. As you know, this situation in India is pretty complex when it comes to LGBTQ rights. And the Pride Parade had only about 500 people in it, and 50 of them were from Salesforce. Now, prior to this day, there wasn't a single individual in our office in India, which has about 2,000 people at the time, who was out. And after this day, one of our employees came out, one, because he felt so empowered, surrounded by this crew of allies, that he knew that he had the space to do this. And what a wonderful moment that was for us and for him. And then I want you to take a look at, this was a march that happened in San Francisco on Martin Luther King. And this is these are some of our members from Bold Force. So it's our employee resource group for our Black individuals in the company. And this first group, about 100 people attended, and they were sharing this message of allyship through the company. And lo and behold, a couple of years later, this is what it looks like. And this is what allyship looks like. We went from just a small group to over 1,100 people coming out and supporting. And this shows the immense power of allyship and making our brothers and sisters feel included. So joining an employee resource group doesn't just mean that you have to identify within the group, but it's a way to really learn about one another, learn about your affinity, and share your support by showing up and by speaking up. Now, I wanted to share with you also a couple of defining stories. And every organization, every leader, every person, we have decisions that we make every single day. And some of them are small. Some of them are on hiring, they're on promotions. And we have that option. Do I choose this or do I choose this? The small add up, and they are so critical to do every day. But there are also some bigger actions that are really in place. And when we look at this concept of business as a platform for change, we look at it over 4 categories. So equal rights, equal education, equal pay, and equal opportunity. And I just wanted to dive into some of these. I'm not going to go deep into all of them, otherwise we'd be going on for a while. But these are some headlines that hit the news about 5 years ago. And at the time, now Vice President of the US, Pence, was leading the state of Indiana. He was the governor of Indiana. And there was a law that was put forward that allowed individuals to discriminate against same-sex couples based on their religious beliefs. At the time, we had just purchased a company in Indianapolis, in Indiana, a company called Exact Target. We were about to have an event up there. It was a big moment for us. And then this law comes into place. And it's so at odds with our values and who we are as an organization. And in this moment, we had an option. We had an option to go there, to have the event, to go forward, keep trying to work through it, etc. But we took a stance, and we took a very public stance. So not only did we pull our event out of there, we encouraged other organizations and other companies to take a stance with the government, to put pressure on the government. We offered the opportunity to relocate employees who felt that their rights were being violated or else their values were being violated by remaining under a government like that. And this law was repealed. It was changed. So, one small voice that came through became a bigger voice, became a group of allies, became a company, became a movement, and we were able to make change and able to make a difference. And we've seen this repeated over multiple times. And it's kind of exhausting because you feel like you finish one and you're on to the next, but we're not going to stop doing this. So really important, thinking about your allyship and moving into an idea of where you can join one of these groups. These are ideas in terms of groups that we have at Salesforce, following things around Ability Force, which is for our individuals who are differently abled, Bold Force, our Black community, Outforce, our LGBTQ+ community, and a really wonderful opportunity. And 1 out of 2 of every employee in our company is part of one of these ERGs. And this really, really shows that support that we have for one another. And then the last piece I want to talk about is on this concept of representation. Now, right now, we're at a critical moment. And we know our companies should really reflect the diverse communities we serve. And this is important. This is an organization, and this is what we strive for. And we have to do this in different ways. And it's not just enough, and I've talked a little bit about the decisions that you make and those small pieces that you make. We really have to look at our numbers. We have to look at the data, and we have to go back to this every single time. And we're not super proud of our data and where we sit at the moment. We have a long way to go. But until we actually stop, look at it, discuss it, and move the needle on it, it's not going to change. So we have dashboards that are available for our leaders across our platform. And when we thought about what are we going to do, how are we going to show this, how are we going to drive change, our CEO said to us, well, use the platform, use the Salesforce platform. And so we did. So we have scorecards that each of our leaders get, and they see their representation scorecard. They have updates on their analytics around how they're doing on this topic in the same way that they would look at business objectives. And they are held accountable to representation in the organization in the same way that they're held accountable for other KPIs and business KPIs that they would have. The other way we use the platform is around trying to drive equality through learning. We have a really wonderful piece called Trailhead where people can go on individually and learn, earn badges. You can see some of the cute badges on the side. And we really worked hard to make sure that we built content that was relevant, that was important, that was meaningful on all of these inclusive practices. And these are things that actually you can each go on. They're publicly available, and we help drive this change. We just put out a new one last week. I'm really proud my team worked on. It was called Inclusive Promotions. Again, to make sure it's one thing to recruit someone in, but how do you make sure that you're driving this person's career through in a fair and an equitable way for the organization? And from this, we can begin to reimagine what the world could look like, what a CEO could look like, what love looks like, what an athlete looks like, what beauty looks like, and change what our preconceived notions are in terms of all of these factors. And the other piece that has come up, and this is, it's been a very, I moved back to the US 4 weeks ago after living in Europe for 8 years. And it's a really unusual time to come back with the protests going on, with what's happening. And I had a moment where I was quite ashamed of the fact that I hadn't taken note and taken stock of what happened and what's been happening, because I've been able to look at news somewhere else. This is not an American problem. This is a problem all around the world. And this is an even deeper problem in the Black trans community. So Rhea Milton, who was 25 years old, who was referred to as being a really joyful person, to Remy Fells, who when you see pictures is always, always smiling. So it's really critical at this point that we have to be active allies and support the Black community in their fight for equality and justice. And especially those who identify as Black and LGBTQ and face multiple layers of hate and discrimination. So we could talk about this concept of intersectionality. So to be marginalized in one piece is difficult enough. To be marginalized in multiple dimensions, it feels like an impossible hill to climb. And despite the progress and the fight, LGBTQ individuals, transgender individuals, non-gender conforming people continue to suffer the consequences of racism, of transphobia, sexism, and violence. So we really have a responsibility to help advocate for our Black LGBTQ plus community. And I ask you to take that moment to do this and to do this with us. So unfortunately, we had a lovely ally video I was going to play for you at the end. It's not going to play for us, but I want to give you a few different calls to action of things that you can do. So if within your university, your organization, et cetera, you have the opportunity, join an ERG. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. Choose one that maybe you don't normally affiliate with and learn something. Please go on Trailhead, take an equality Trailhead mix, earn some badges, and then think about practicing allyship, asking, listening, showing up, and speaking up. So during Pride Month and every month, so it's not just good enough to do this once a year in the month of June, it's thinking about what you do every single day. It's the sum of all of these actions, how we can intentionally stand up for what's right. Make sure as you go into your leadership journey, as you come out of school, you remember to lead with empathy and take the time to do your own research. And if you choose to reach out, make sure you're leading with empathy there. Be an ally. Make sure you become personally involved in political activities that support change. This is not always easy. This is not simple, but it's a responsibility that we have. Donate where you can, learn and explore. And there was a wonderful quote that Tyler said when I was actually talking to him a couple of days, and I wanted to leave you with that. And he said, a way that you carry as an ally is to emulate worth and love. So I ask you to think about the opportunities that you have to drive allyship, to drive a more fair and equal world, and also to drive innovation through this different way. So I thank you so much for your time, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Linda, for your presentation. We really appreciate you representing a multinational corporation as a leader in the LGBT equality. But we do have a question for you from an individual who's watching. So someone who's in a junior role, who fears the repercussions of being an agent of change, can you give them advice as to how to navigate that role within their own organizations?
Sure, and this is where finding your allies, finding your tribe, who are your people who stand up with you, and also find the right organization to join. We have choices when we're going into business and we're going into work and thinking through, does this organization represent what I believe in? And what you'll find is if you work for an organization that leads with values that are aligned with yours, you'll be able to have the space to be that catalyst. And I really, really encourage you, it is your responsibility to do that and to drive change. And I often say, one day if I get fired, it is going to be for the right reason. I don't think it's going to be from here because my values align deeply with the organization. But I have my allies, I have my tribe that are around me that help amplify that voice. So perhaps even find a senior leader who can help amplify your voice. Understand your concerns, but you should never shy away from being an advocate. It's hard work. It's hard to drive change, but please, please, please do not give up on it.
Thank you one last time, Linda, for being a part of this conference. We appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Hello everyone, I'm Fabian Santaniello, co-chair of the Logistics Committee for LGBT at Work 2020. Thank you to Johnson & Johnson for your sponsorship this year and the continuous work you do for our community. I am now so happy to introduce Amanda McKay in Scotland. Amanda is an out trans woman and a strong advocate for diversity, inclusion within the construction sector. She is the quality director for the major projects business within Balfour Beatty. Her main area of work is nuclear and highly regulated projects. Amanda has worked in this sector for over 35 years, mainly with QHSE roles and corporate governance. She has experience in nuclear, rail, renewables, oil, and gas. She also works to promote young people in STEM careers and serves as a mentor as well. She is a Fairness, Inclusion, and Respect Ambassador and an outstanding Top 100 LGBT Executive List member for the last 2 years. Amanda is a chair of the Balfour Beatty LGBT Plus and Allies Network and the Gender Equality Network. Now, take it away, Amanda.
Thank you, Fabian. You've stolen a little bit of my thunder and part of my introduction today, but yes, I'm Amanda McKay. I'm a late middle-aged trans woman. I was born intersex and transitioned quite late in life at the age of 49. And it's something that for a lot of trans people, you know you're different at an early age. And I've lived with the ups and downs of gender dysphoria throughout my career. And that's had quite a significant effect on things, living in the closet, not really being your authentic self. And having now transitioned and seen how that affects myself, it's something that's really important to me in helping others. I've worked all my life in the engineering and construction sector. I'm a mine engineer by degree. Having left university in 1984, I'm not sure that I could have successfully transitioned into what was then the mining industry, an industry that didn't even allow women to work underground. It was a very, very misogynistic and certainly at the time very conservative and quite homophobic sector. And it was something that for me, knowing that I was different, would have been very difficult to transition. I've always been an active volunteer throughout my adult life. And it's something that I use as a coping strategy in dealing with my gender dysphoria, being able to be useful and do other things to keep myself busy. In my early years, it was with the Territorial Army, which was at the time the UK's Army Reserve, and in later years in law enforcement as a police reservist. I spent 22 years as an active special constable within the UK, something that gave me a great number of life skills. And more importantly, it was one of the things that really got me to start and think about my transition, start and think about LGBT. It was really my first interaction with LGBT networks. The police in the United Kingdom have been very, very active for many, many years in having an LGBT network. These days, I spend my time working with LGBT charities and with a number of professional bodies, professional institutes, particularly in the areas of mentoring, although I'm a trustee of a number of charities in the UK. At the time of my transition in 2013, I was working as a very senior assurance leader within one of the United Kingdom's big six energy providers. I was part of their asset development program. I was a senior leader running the assurance side of this, working on things such as wind farms, hydroelectric schemes, offshore wind, some very, very large, expensive projects and large parts of the UK energy infrastructure. One of the things that really struck me that when I started to transition, firstly, it was a very scary concept. As somebody who was in a senior role, it was very difficult for me to envisage how that would affect my career moving forward. It was something that frightened me a great deal, and it was probably one of the first things which prevented me from transitioning in my early years. So transitioning as a senior leader meant that everything was quite visible within my organisation. I was highly visible in my day job. I was visible within a wider community within the energy sector. So people would see me and would know who I was. So that transition was a very visible and public thing. There were no trans employees in my own organisation, and there were no role models that I knew of in senior leadership roles that I could actually go to and ask advice for. I ended up having to write the organisation's trans policies and their protocols for working with members of the trans community. And I was very lucky to have an HR team that were open to listening and an organisation that, despite working in a very conservative sector, were prepared to learn and to progress with me. So whilst my initial transition went really well, and I grew in confidence because I was accepted, and I grew a number of allies who supported me because I was very capable and effective senior leader in my organisation. And I think my ability to continue in my work was something that was very important to me, but it was also showed to the organisation that transition had not affected how I worked. Something that I did notice, though, my peer group started to treat me slightly differently. And it was that loss of what I would describe as male privilege, which is something I'd never really thought about. I'd grown throughout my career. I'd been an army officer in the Army Reserves. I was a senior officer within the police establishment. Male privilege is something that you don't necessarily understand that you have. You don't know that it's there. You don't realize that you are seen as different. And when I transitioned, I found that I was the only senior woman in a team full of men. Now, whilst I was never part of the conversation on sports and football, that's really not something of interest to me. I was always included in the technical discussions and in the discussions around the business and the organisation and organisational change. And all of a sudden, I found that I was being discouraged from being actively involved in the construction projects, not seen as they didn't really want me to go out onto site. They didn't want me to go into our offshore installations out in the North Sea and in the Irish Sea. And I really found that I felt I had to prove myself more so and become more actively involved in things and carrying out some of the more arduous tasks that my team were involved with. And at the age of 50, I found myself learning to abseil out of a wind tower to do blade inspections and having to do the physical climbing on offshore wind towers just to try and prove that I was still the same person, still the same capable individual. In 2015, I moved jobs and moved to Balfour Beatty, which is my present employer. And a lot of the issues that I saw actually disappeared, which was quite strange for me. I didn't really understand why that was until somebody pointed out to me that my new employer had never known me in my previous self. And many of the barriers that I'd seen in other organisations, also barriers to women and minorities working in senior roles, weren't there in Balfour Beatty. They were a very supportive and progressive employer. They increasingly asked me to do public speaking and to talk about my experiences, not just about engineering, but also about my transition, about coming out as trans later in life. And in the course of doing so, I was able to raise a lot of awareness within the energy and environment sector across construction and engineering. But one of the things that hit me in discussions with other members of the trans community working within engineering, and particularly from some of the younger trans women, was that as I transitioned later in life, I'd achieved a senior role before my transition. My male privilege had certainly helped me to achieve that position. And they were quite skeptical of the advice I was giving them about my journey. And it's something that I'd not really thought of as being a valid point. So I had to reflect back that if I was their age now, or I was transitioning in my early 20s, I'm not really sure I would have had the ability to climb the corporate ladder in the same way. And I don't think I would have had the same work and life experiences as I'd had to date. It really got me thinking about how I could change things for other people. I'm really passionate about STEM. I'm a STEM ambassador within my own organisation, and I work with a lot of young people, both in the LGBT community and those who are interested in engineering. And for me, I'm always looking to find the best and the brightest talent that I can help develop and help them on their career path. And I looked at things that I could do, particularly working in this very conservative sector of construction, where I found few women and few people of colour in senior roles. And I talked about, within my own organisation, about mentoring, how I could find people within the organisation and help them along their career path. Now, many of the management team, they're heterosexual, cisgendered, and what I would call male, pale, and quite stale. And research shows that diverse boards are more innovative and more profitable. So the current situation really needed to change. My sector had little knowledge and experience of this, and so I participated with us, and we helped to bring together groups of like-minded people to form organisations like Building Equality. I'm on the National Executive of Building Equality. We're a UK cross-company organisation for LGBT in construction. Participating in schemes to talk about my experience led me mentoring many others and helping them to understand the characteristics for future leaders and giving them an insight into the skills and behaviours. And the mentoring has helped people not only within my own organisation, but across other companies as well, and particularly students. And recently, more importantly, those returning to the workplace following career breaks and unemployment. This has been particularly useful for people coming back into the construction sector. In the sector that I work in, we have a skills shortage. We're always looking for new talent. We're always looking for new people. And we've traditionally tapped into one particular group of white male heterosexual individuals. We realise we need to actually look further. We need to have a talent pool which embraces all of society. And through our mentoring, through our greater involvement with equality, diversity and inclusion across a wider sector, we've actually managed to increase that talent pool. The mentoring project itself actually led to a scheme which was sponsored by our executive into reverse mentoring programs, where we have younger employees from diverse backgrounds who mentor our senior leaders and executive board members. This has been really successful and increased understanding and awareness of the senior leader community and led to real positive change. We now have programs within the organisation which support women returners, which support our BAME community, which support our LGBT community. We have increased the ability of our senior leaders to understand and empathise with younger members of the organisation who have a different viewpoint on work and work-life balance, flexibility of working, on how they want to shape their own careers. And I see mentoring as a great way of giving back to the community and helping others. And I've worked on many schemes, not just across engineering and construction, but I support many younger trans people in their journey into the world of work, particularly those who have transitioned early in life and are still at school or at university. As I mentioned previously, I work in what's considered a very conservative and male-dominated sector. It had a reputation for not being very LGBT friendly and not somewhere a person from the community could prosper or have a rewarding career. Today, the sector has changed and recognises the value of a diverse workforce, the need to attract talent from across the population. And after all, that skills shortage isn't going away, and we have a large programme of works. My own organisation are currently mobilising large projects, regardless of the current COVID environment. Large infrastructure projects are still happening across the United Kingdom. Making the sector LGBT aware and friendly has not been an easy task, and that change still continues to happen across the industry. Groups such as Building Equality and Inter Engineering have helped to raise the awareness, and they've helped to work with STEM groups and across the college and university sectors to promote construction, engineering and the STEM environment as being an LGBT-friendly sector to work within. Balfour Beatty was one of the first construction companies to have an LGBT affinity network, and it's one of the reasons I moved to the company, an organisation which I saw as actually having an LGBT community within it and possibly better understanding my needs as a trans woman working in a senior role. One of the tools that I've helped to share awareness across my own organisation and across the wider sector is the use of what we call toolbox talks. Toolbox talks have always been around within construction, and they stem from the early days where the foreman and the supervisor would give a daily brief to the men who would sit on their toolbox talks prior to starting work. We don't all sit on toolboxes today to carry the talks, but the same ethos has arisen that we give toolbox talks to our workforce to share a piece of information or something that we wish them to be aware of. And I, along with others, have helped develop LGBT awareness toolbox talks. These are now delivered across my own organisation and are part of our induction. They help people to better understand that we're a diverse community and that we won't tolerate intolerance of difference. It helps us also to be able to integrate our supply chain, and we help our supply chain as well through our affinity network. We're not just there for our Balfour Beatty employees, but for all of our suppliers and for our customers and communities as well. You will now see in many Pride celebrations, you'll see people from the construction sector celebrating Pride, marching with others from other organisations, and you'll also see that we like to celebrate maybe slightly differently. We actually have a JCB excavator that is in rainbow colours, which is provided by one of our ally companies, and we use that Pride organisation, Pride, as a float, and that's to help raise awareness that construction is a great place to work, regardless of who you are, with gender, sexuality, colour, or ability. I do think we still have a long way to go, and certainly recent UK government leaked changes to legislation which will adversely affect the trans community if they come into place, have helped to mobilise a number of organisations and help them get to speak out that it will affect their employees and it will affect the way that our talent pool works. My own organisation has spoken about this internally, and through Building Equality and Inter-Engineering, we've spoken about this nationally, trying to raise awareness that trans employees and trans members of the community will be adversely affected by this. One of the areas that I have raised awareness within my own organisation, and I think it was talked about at the very beginning of this event today, is that business performance is affected by diversity. Diverse leadership and organisations that embrace diversity don't have to worry about things like staff numbers, about performance, and about employee turnover. Innovation is a great driver within the engineering sector, and we've noticed that as our industry has become more diverse, we've become more innovative. And at times like these with COVID and potential recessions, innovation is a game changer for us. And we recognise that having that diverse culture has actually made us a more stronger and more resilient organisation. It's tapped into skills and areas of knowledge which we never really thought about. And we've really driven our change and our ability to move forward post-COVID from innovation driven by that diverse workforce. A key part of our diverse workforce is the potential for greater innovation. This sector is really, really important for the UK moving forward. Our government has announced that infrastructure and construction will certainly be a key part of the recovery. We recognise that to be able to be part of that, we've got to change. Our workforce is now diverse. We have a greater focus on innovation, and it's something that we see as crucial to our survival. In finishing off, having spent my adult work within engineering construction, I've seen some real change across this sector. I never in my wildest dreams at the age of 21, leaving university, believed that I would be working in a sector that would support me as a trans person, and more importantly, would be driven by talent and ability rather than by the previous misogynistic and quite male, pale and stale leadership of the past. Being a senior leader within my business and a trans woman, and being able to be accepted and succeed, is certainly a sign of change within my own industry. And I think it's something that I would love to see younger people being able to flourish within this sector in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda, so much for being here with us tonight and for being such a valuable component for the LGBT plus community. We do have a question for someone watching, and they want to know, going with your finishing statement, what would you say to young Amanda, knowing where you are at right now?
I think there's something that I've thought about before. I would have to say I'd have the courage of my own convictions and to be true to myself and to understand that to succeed in life and to be the best person I can be will be to be my authentic self. And I would love to have made that brave decision to transition at the age of 21 when I first went to the gender clinic in London. So looking back, I would say take that decision, be brave, and trust in society to change, and trust in your own ability to be a great engineer and leader. And people will see you as not just a trans person, but as a great individual.
Thank you so much for those encouraging words and for your participation this year.
Thank you.
Me siento libre de salir y decir, mira, somos muchísimos y somos valientes y estamos orgullosos.
La verdad es que nos hace mucha ilusión ir en la carroza y compartir este momento juntas como pareja.
La Amazon es un grupo interno de Amazon organizado por trabajadores voluntarios.
Nuestro objetivo es fomentar la diversidad e inclusión. Nuestra misión es que los trabajadores se sientan aceptados y cómodos en su lugar de trabajo.
Lo importante es que no se centra solamente en la comunidad LGTB, sino que cualquier empleado de cualquier colectivo sexual puede participar.
Esta es la primera vez que Amazon participa en el desfile del orgullo de Madrid. Esto me parece muy emocionante.
¿Qué siente el Día del Orgullo?
Aceptación.
Comunidad.
Respeto.
Valoración.
Libertad. Diversión.
A mí me tocó la plaza para ir a la carroza, pero como a María le hacía más ilusión, pues la cedía a ella. Entonces otro empleado de Amazon se enteró de que nos hubiese encantado ir juntas y sin esperármelo me dio su plaza.
Creo que trabajar en un entorno diverso e inclusivo da la seguridad de ser uno mismo y no sentirse rechazado.
Queremos que el Amazon trascienda. Nos gustaría en un futuro dar mentorías a niños o charlas en colegios sobre temas LGTB.
Lo que más nos emociona de participar en el desfile es que Amazon nos da la oportunidad de formar parte de este día y conocer a gente que está a favor de la igualdad.
No me siento solo. Me encantaría que gracias a Amazon se creara una comunidad, un sentido de conexión entre la gente. Y eso es lo que creo que poco a poco estamos consiguiendo.
Thank you, Gillette, for their sponsorship. Hello, everybody. I am Andrea, member of the marketing committee for LGBT at Work 2020, and I am pleased to introduce Stefan Ritter in Germany. Former artist turned enterprise software entrepreneur, Stefan and his co-founder secured 12 million euros to launch a new product division for SAP in the high-growth process automatization market. He leads the fast-growing team across 3 continents and across design, data science, and engineering. Before joining SAP, Stefan was an analytic consultant in the New York Times in Paris under the Google Digital News Initiative Fund and taught design in the University College London after having led the design of Said's Museum for Contemporary African Art at Heatherwick Studio. He was born in Austria, and beside Germany, he lived and worked in China, the US, Japan, Belgium, the UK. Thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Hi everyone, my name is Stefan. Thank you, Andrea, also for the long introduction. Today I want to talk a little bit about what I've learned as a new manager at SAP and what I've learned in trying to build a diverse and inclusive environment. My talk has 3 parts. I'm going to start a little bit to talk about myself and my journey as a new manager. Then I want to introduce you to my team and what it means to them that we're diverse and inclusive. And then finally, I'll finish off with the 5 principles and hopefully give you some actual insights on what you can do to build an inclusive team. So I'm going to start with my story, and I'm not going to give you the download of my CV. But what I do want to talk about is the 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to take over and lead a team at SAP and become a manager. And what happens when you become a manager is you very quickly notice that what you do, what you don't do, what you say, what you don't say, and how you behave has an immense impact on the team and the people who are working with you and around you. And so it forced me to reflect on my career, and it forced me to reflect on how I got to where I was. And what I found out is that actually I've been burying my queerness inside my corporate persona. So you can see this on the camera, that I can come across as a straight white man. And I've done this. I've unconsciously and also consciously used that fact to progress my career. And so in reflecting on what kind of a team I want to build, I decided I want a team where nobody has to pretend they're someone else and they can be successful in who they are and truly be themselves. And so one of the lucky things as well is that I work for SAP, and SAP is an incredibly inclusive and pro-diversity employer. Here on the slide, you can see some of the commitments that we have and some of the awards that we got. So SAP has committed itself to the UN goals for LGBTI standards of conduct for business. But then not only have we committed to it, we've also been rewarded. SAP America is #1 in Forbes Best Employers for Diversity. And here in Germany, we're also #1 on the DAX LGBTI inclusive company. And so it's really amazing to be working for a company where we really put our money where our mouth is. And one story I want to share with you, because when I started as a manager, I started asking around, what are some of the challenges we have? And one story I want to share that's really inspired me as well is, like many companies, and as you can see on the slide, we put our rainbow flag behind our logo during Pride Month. And what I heard is that last year, there was a former colleague of ours who complained about this. They were saying, you've made my LinkedIn profile gay. I don't support this. And the email that we sent to this person, in it, we said, look, being linked with SAP's brand means being linked with SAP's values. And if they don't agree with those, then they need to remove SAP from their LinkedIn profile. And I thought it was so powerful that the company that I work for really doesn't just pinkwash its logo, but actually stands up when there's a complaint. And so that also really inspired me. Now, next, I want to talk a little bit about my team. On the next slide, you'll see a little picture of my team. It's 2 years old. We were 15 people back then. By now, we're 30. And everything for me stops and starts with the team. So the people you work with they have so much impact on your life. And so it's really important for me to give a shout out to them and how amazing they are. So SAP does this people survey once a year. And our team scores very high on diversity. You can see it on the picture. We're very diverse in terms of skin color, in terms of gender identity. Now we're also diverse in terms of age, now that we're bigger. We're also diverse in terms of religious beliefs. And we score really high on diversity, but we also score really high on inclusivity, on inclusion. We're at 97%, which is the highest in the company. And when I told this to Tyler and Eddie, they were like, well, don't just throw these numbers at us. Tell us what it means. And so what I did is I sent an email to my team and I asked them, hey, we're really high on these scores. Can you drop me 1 or 2 lines on what this means for you? And does it have any impact on your work? And so what I want to share with you is a few lines on what I heard from the team. And this was actually reflecting on this again as well. This was probably one of the top moments of my career so far as well, to see what kind of an impact this has on the team. We've heard things like, being in a diverse team really opened my eyes. It's an endless learning opportunity. Somebody said, creativity from different ways of thinking. We establish a sense of belonging. I feel inspired and empowered. I never felt like an outsider. This is a safe space where everyone can speak up. By default, every member is thinking outside the box. I no longer feel the need to hide my personality. I just stopped apologizing for being different. True diversity also leads to diversity of thought. And I don't have to walk on eggshells around anyone because we all just accept each other who we are. So it was really an unbelievable moment. From the 30 people in my team, 15 sent me emails, not just 2 sentences, but entire paragraphs. And the other half started talking to me in private what it means to them. And so it was really, really inspiring and empowering as well to get this feedback from the team. Next, I want to talk a little bit about what I've learned. So I want to share with you 5 principles, 5 insights on what you can do, or what I can hopefully give to you to also implement that in your company. Number 1 is start with yourself. So a little bit like I said in the beginning, I had to reflect on who I was and how I got to where I am. And so it's really important to know your own bias and know your own weakness. So one thing to help you with getting to understand your own bias is there's this famous text called The Surgeon Riddle from 1975. And I'm just going to quickly read it out for you. A father and his son are involved in a horrific car crash, and the man died at the scene. But when the child arrived at the hospital and was rushed into the operating theater, the surgeon pulled away and said, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son." So what I really like about this text is that think a little bit about how you react and who you think, and in your mind, the story you tell is who this surgeon is. For me, I have to admit that it took me like 3 or 4 rounds of thinking before I said, it's the boy's mother. I had all sorts of other stories around, it might be a gay couple and this is a second father and so on. But so it's really important to understand and to become aware of your own bias and your own default thinking. The next thing I want to talk about is your weaknesses. So the slide here shows my 3 strengths, and then also corresponding to that, those are also my biggest weaknesses. Now, to find out about your best strengths and weaknesses, I think it's really important to talk to your best friends, talk to the people who love you, because they're going to be the most honest. And in my case, one of my strengths are that I'm an expansive thinker, which means I'm really good at connecting things from different industries and different disciplines to come up with a new solution. Now, the flip side of that is I have a lack of patience for details. Another strength of mine is I'm very decisive. I'm really good at, if I have 7 options, I know I can decide one and we move forward. On the flip side, that stifles collaboration. And so it's really important that when I started to build a team and when you hire the team, that you want to find people who fit well and can compensate for your weaknesses. And so we can all work together better. And finally, I'm really good at getting inspired or motivated by new things, and then have that be an infectious moment towards the team. But on the flip side, that can lead to a new shiny object syndrome, which means I'm really good at starting new things, but that could stop us from getting things done. And so really understanding who you are and what your strengths are and corresponding weaknesses will help you to define and hire accordingly. Principle number 2. Don't delay diversity. So I say this because of 3 reasons. One, it's like I said in the beginning, how you act and what you do and what you prioritize has an immense impact on the culture of your team. People will notice if you need to fill a role very quickly and you don't take the time to evaluate and build a pipeline of diverse candidates and just give it to the next best person. This will have an immense impact on the culture of your team. And culture is unbelievably important. Number 2 is if you delay diversity, is what I've learned is that one of the biggest sources for hiring and for finding new candidates is actually the networks, or are the networks of your team members. And so if you have a very homogeneous team, chances are that their networks are also very homogeneous. And so it'll make it harder for you to build a pipeline of diverse candidates. And then point number 3, if you have a team of 10 people and they're all very homogeneous, very same type of person, the first person who joins the team who is different will feel very different, and it will make it harder to create a sense of inclusion. And so that's why it's important to not delay diversity. Just one note on that, there's a movie that recently was released on Netflix, Late Night by Mindy Kaling. It's an incredibly fun movie, but as well it's also very educational around what it means to delay diversity and what some of the consequences are. So if you don't know what to watch after this conference, I would advise go on Netflix and watch Late Night. All right, next principle, language matters. So this one, again, is around reflecting on being a manager and understanding that how I say stuff, what I say and what I don't say has a strong impact on the culture in the team. And so there's 2 aspects of this. One is the language inside the team. How do we talk to each other? And so one of the things that I've made a habit of is every time before I go into a meeting, I will say to myself, I trust that the other person knows something that I don't. And going into a meeting with this mindset will really automatically make you communicate and talk in a more inclusive and more open manner. On the right, I also have 2 book recommendations for you. One is called A More Beautiful Question, and the other one is called The Mom Test. And in these books, they talk about how to phrase questions in an open way and how to phrase questions in a way that it's inviting and will allow people to build on top of each other's ideas. A simple example might be a bit of an obvious one, but the books are long and there's a lot to read in them. One example is, don't ask a question like, is this a good idea? It's a leading question, but it's also a judging question because it implies good and bad in an idea. It's much better to ask a question like, if we do it like this, how much time would we save? That creates a more open sense and allows more of a discussion around an idea. Second point around language is the language you have towards the outside, and especially your candidates. I think it's a very well-known topic that's been discussed a lot, is that, for example, women interpret job descriptions differently than men do. And so we have a tool called Text.io that we use where we just copy paste our job descriptions, and the tool will help you identify if your language is very masculine or feminine, inclusive or not, and help you transform your texts to make them more inclusive. Next principle, build a diverse pipeline. I think this is also incredibly important. I've learned that it's not enough to just post a job and pray that a lot of people will apply and a lot of diverse people will apply. The problem is that, or the reality is that the default persona in our corporate world, especially in Europe, is the straight white man. And so when you just post and pray and do the default, you will get a lot of default candidates. So what we did in my team is we actually went outside the norm and hired a recruiter inside the team so we could actively recruit ourselves. And then quickly we faced this problem that if you, for example, want to hire via the LinkedIn recruiter, there is no filter for diversity. And probably and of course also for a good reason. But the problem is if there's no filter, it means that the default filter is on, and the default filter is straight white man. So for example, when I was looking to hire a manager, if you put in manager 10 years experience, you have to scroll through tens of 20 to 30 pages before you find diverse candidates, and all of the others are typically white male, straight white male. And so it's really important to actively recruit in our spaces. Go to Unicorns in Tech, go to conferences like this, go to Blacks in Tech, Businesswomen Network, and so on, because it's really, if you want to build a team and create a culture, it's important that you have a pipeline of enough people so that you can design this culture as well. Next and final point, when you do the interview, when I do interviews, I interview for diversity and collaboration. I think it's really important to ask the candidates how they think and feel about these things, because it will help you to understand if this is a person that will thrive, but also improve the culture of the team. So here are just 3 questions that I like to ask. I'm going to read them out to you. The first one is a question that I actually borrowed from Slack. They ask in their interviews, tell me about a situation from a previous company where something was substandard and how you helped to fix it. This is a question that will help you understand how collaborative this person is. And if they see a problem, will they go and help the people who have this problem? Another question I like to ask is, tell me about some people who helped you in your career and how did they do it? For me, this is a really important question because it will tell me about how this person thinks about career. And if they understand that in order to be successful, you have to work together with others, and you especially have to learn from others. And so this question will tell you about a person's growth mindset. Typically, if someone, a bad answer here would be, oh, I'm just really good at my job. A good answer is someone who can come up with so many people that they don't even know who to name first. And then finally, the third question that I ask, so when I hire a manager, I will flat out ask, what is your strategy around diversity? Because if I hire a manager into the team, they will be responsible for growing the team. They will be responsible for growing the culture. And so I need to make sure that the person who joins will also invest and help me increase the influence and increase this culture and grow the team accordingly. For individual contributors, I will ask, what does diversity mean to you? Or I will ask, describe a team culture that you thrived in. And it's really interesting to understand and hear about what kind of culture somebody prefers and if they will do well in a very diverse team. All right. just for closing, I'm going to repeat my 5 points. Start with yourself. Know your bias and your weakness. Don't delay diversity. It's really important to think about this upfront and don't think you can do it tomorrow because it's just going to get harder. The language matters. How you talk and how you communicate is really important. Invest in building a diverse pipeline. Don't just post and pray. And then finally, also do your due diligence in interviews. Interview for diversity and collaboration. And with that, those were my 5 points. I hope they were helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan, for being here with us today. We have a question from an individual watching asking, with different levels of knowledge in diversity, how do you continue positive conversations with your team without exhausting the conversation?
That's a good question. I think that comes back to one of my strengths is that I'm a very decisive person. So I think it's really important to be a moderator in meetings and be aware of the fact when people get tired of over communicating a decision or over discussing a decision. I think that it's important that you also learn this a little bit. It's a soft skill that you have to learn as a manager, is how do you moderate and how do you make a communication and make a meeting work well, so that people don't get tired of it. But I also have the feeling that that doesn't really happen in my team. So I think everyone in my team is very goal oriented. And so no one likes to just talk endlessly around things. They rather just come up with a good idea, bounce ideas off each other and then get executing.
Thank you, Stefan, for your contribution in this year's conference. We were thrilled to have you involved.
Thank you. Ciao.
Me siento orgulloso de trabajar en Banco Santander porque me permite participar en proyectos innovadores y con personas muy diversas y muy creativas.
I'm proud to work at Santander because I get to be me every day when I come to work. 30 years ago when I started in banking, being out was not an option. But today, I can be me, I can share my personal life, I can be who I am and bring my whole self to the office every day.
Estoy orgullosa de trabajar en Santander porque es un banco inclusivo que impulsa el talento en todas sus diversidades.
The respect that the company shows for our employees. We foster a very inclusive work environment here, obviously with our various ENG groups, and that makes me very proud to work here.
I don't think my colleagues really know what asexuality is or really understand it, but they're really supportive anyway, even if they just sort of understand Helen is queer. And they're just, very supportive about that. All of my team come along to all the Embrace events with me just to give me support and try and learn and understand more, which is really good.
Pride es el amor, el respeto, la tolerancia y la dignidad hacia las diferencias.
Donde las personas puedan ser ellas mismas sin sufrir ningún tipo de discriminación.
Es saber que todos podemos juntos trabajar para vencer los muchos prejuicios sociales que aún existen en nuestro país.
Thank you, Santander, for help making this year's conference a success. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our closing speaker for tonight, Suresh Raj. Suresh is the Chief Business Development Officer at Vision 7 International, part of Blue Focus International, a global marketing communications group. A seasoned Marcoms professional, Suresh has been leading business development and growth in this sector for over 20 years. Prior to joining Vision 7, Suresh was Worldwide Chief Business Development Officer for Agovi Group. With extensive experience across NA, EMEA, LATAM, and APAC, Suresh drives pipeline growth and builds integrated agency teams across strategy, insight, data, and creativity to solve clients' brand challenges. In addition, Suresh is an equality, diversity, and inclusion champion. For 4 years running, he's been featured on 2 prominent Financial Times and Yahoo Finance lists, the top 100 ethnic minorities executives, and the top 100 LGBTQ executive leaders. Suresh is an inaugural member of the Alliance, a working group of senior C-suite LGBTQ+ leaders from around the world, brought together by McKinsey to address equality issues affecting key sectors and geographies. In 2019, he chaired a conversation on humanity and equality at the Global Tech Conference in Vancouver. So without further ado, I present to you our closing speaker for tonight, Suresh Raj.
Thank you so much, Eddie. I'm just checking that sound system and everything good. Can I crack on?
All good.
Great. So thank you again, Eddie, and hello, everyone. It is so nice to be part of this community in the form of really incredible, important conversations that have happened today. As Eddie said, my name is Suresh, and I'm the Chief Business Development Officer at Vision 7 International, and we are a global marketing communications agency network, part of the Blue Focus International Group. I'm gay, proudly gay, as you can tell, an ethnic minority of Malay, Arab, Indian, and Palestinian Jew origins. I'm a husband, I'm a parent, and as you can tell, I've got a dog who also just jumped at the door. And I've lived in Malaysia, the UK, and now New York. So a lot of my experiences and view of life has been peppered by the experiences I've lived through as a result of this kaleidoscope of a background. So thank you again so much for having me. And I must apologize for whenever the dog barks, but unfortunately it's a small apartment. I wanted to start by grounding us in the word innovation. It can mean so many things to so many people, but it really depends on where you are in the world, the environment you live in, socially, politically, economically, geographically, and more. But one thing it does have in common is that it all suggests one thing, and one very important thing, which is change. Change as a result of a new method, a new idea, a new product. But for today, I wanted to look at this word in the context of a new hope, because of everything we're seeing in society right now, and it is there that our conversation starts. Meet my mother, a loving woman, deeply religious, who lived her life in the ideals she was taught. It was not wrong or right, it was simply what she knew. In 2002, on a brief visit home, my mother knocked on my door at about 7 a.m. and entered. I was still, of course, very groggy from sleep, but I'll never forget the words that came out of her mouth at that moment. She said, "If I ever find out you are gay, it'll be the quickest way to send me to my grave." So in that one instant, I shut myself off completely. I buried myself, in fact, and as the years passed, the deeper that pain went. I just never told her, and I never told anyone. In 2008, 2 days before Christmas, she passed away from cancer, unfortunately never knowing the real me. Now, years of suppression bubbled up, pain and trauma from feeling like I was unaccepted. I existed, yes, but I did not feel alive. I was not living, and it was slowly killing me from within. By the new year, I decided I was done being an unknown. I decided to come out to my entire religious family and to many aspects of my professional life too, because I was really tired of feeling unfulfilled. And I was already about 35 years old at this point. And if you look at the trajectory of human life, that's nearly half my life being suppressed. Now, I wanted to be 100% me. I wanted to embrace my human. And not just embrace it, but to live it fully, celebrate it, and not be ashamed to share it with the rest of the world. Because when I could give 100% of me, I felt more fulfilled as a human being. Does this mean I hated my mother for her words? No. I will always love her, and I will live with the regret of never telling her my truth. And maybe one day when I see her again, I will be able to tell her about the fabulous life that I've continued to live. But this trauma and pain has taught me one important thing, which we'll discuss shortly. In April 2019, I had the immense pleasure of listening to Hannah Gadsby deliver a talk at the TED conference in Vancouver. For those who are not familiar with Hannah, she's an Australian comedian, a lesbian, and is autistic. Her breakaway show was called Nanette. If you have planned to look up the TED talk, by the way, it was called 3 Ideas and 3 Contradictions. Now, in the 18 minutes Hannah had on stage, her words were poignant, raw, and emotive, but ironically, not funny. It was one of the most of all honest conversations I've heard. One question she posed during her talk really gripped me, and I've been grappling with that question ever since. It's a question that continuously gnaws at me, in good times and in bad times, a question that constantly sanity checks me in everything that I do. When I consider all my past and the possibilities of my future, I cannot help but wonder, what is the purpose of my human? Now, this is such a powerful, gripping question. So intense, yet so simple and intense. It's about you and your place on this earth. What is your purpose? You see, Nanette and all of Hannah's stand-up routine since the start was simply to tell her truth, all of it, to share the literal, visceral pain of her trauma through comedy. Now, isn't that ironic? Funny, but painful. Her strength, i.e. comedy, is derived from her weakness, i.e. her trauma. But it made me think, what if I shared my truth, the literal, visceral pain of my personal trauma in life, being gay in a deeply religious upbringing, being ethnic minority in a predominantly white world, and that's both professionally and personally, and the challenges and pain these intersectionalities bring. What then would happen? And then it hit me. In telling my truth, the purpose of my human, I could be a stronger person and perhaps change the world for the better. Even if it's just the little corner of the world where I exist and where I live. And maybe the ripple of my pebble on a sea of humanity could actually lead to a tsunami of change later on. And the more I tell my truth, the more I set free the boundaries of my existence and perhaps for others. Breaking those boundaries and reshaping the world to one where I feel my existential human actually exists. But more than just exists, where my human actually lives, truly lives. In full equality. A much, much happier place. If not for me right now, perhaps for the generations to come. And that is where my journey to be an advocate, vocal proponent, and champion on matters of equality began. Not on a global stage, but in the small acts of clarity and equality in my personal and professional life. Years later, amongst the many platforms in which I'm able to become a voice for the community, I was privileged to be included in the Alliance, a group created and curated by McKinsey. Now, McKinsey created the Alliance in 2018, bringing together 100 of the world's leading LGBTQ+ leaders across private, public, and social industries to create a think tank that convenes to share experiences, uncover challenges, and create action groups to tackle some of these pressing issues. I was very privileged and honored to be included in this group, and we continue to collaborate today to work towards helping our community. McKinsey launched a report just last week called LGBTQ+ Voices, Learning from Lived Experiences, and you can Google this and you'll find it. This new research reveals the challenges for LGBTQ employees. In many ways, these are examples of the continuous pain and trauma when repeated day in and day out in a personal or professional setting that really eats away at an individual's self-worth. Pulling out some of these quotes in the research, foremost amongst these is coming out. More than 1 in 4 LGBTQ respondents are not broadly out at work. Coming out and being out matters. Being out is key to forming relationships, one of the most important facets and fundamentals about being in a workforce. We've just heard Stefan talk about teamwork being important, so being comfortable and being out in that environment is important. Now, the research revealed 4 complexities of coming out at work. First one, coming out is especially challenging for junior employees. Only 1/3 of LGBTQ survey respondents below the level of senior manager reported being out with most of their colleagues. Number 2, women are far less likely to be out. Only 58% of LGBTQ women said that they are out with most colleagues. One key reason here is existing gender discrimination, a further challenge to equality. Number 3, coming out is more difficult for people outside of Europe and North America. While 3/4 of North American respondents and 78% of European respondents were out at work, only 54% of respondents from other regions reported being out with most of their colleagues. And there are cultural reasons for this. There are religious reasons for this as well. And the final one, for People who are open about being LGBTQ plus often have to come out repeatedly. Now, nearly half of LGBTQ respondents reported having to come out at work at least once a week during the previous month alone. 23 years into my career, I am still having to come out or correct assumptions. Just recently, in fact, it was just before COVID hit, in a meeting, in a moment of casual conversation about our children, and I am a parent, as I mentioned, a client repeatedly referred to my wife. On the fourth time, I corrected him and said, actually, it's my husband. At that moment, the client just stopped talking and refused to engage. It was a very awkward many minutes of silence that followed, and it clearly showed a certain antagonism towards it. But these experiences, when accumulated, start to snowball into a really difficult life. Let's talk about 2020. Well, what a year it's been already. We talk about health pandemics, societal upheaval, socioeconomic storms, climate extremities, and it's only 1st of July. But the health pandemic has actually brought about an unexpected win for humanity. Because a lot of us have been homebound, we've been spending a lot more time on digital platforms, and with that, we're taking the time to read, to listen, to educate ourselves, and to see the world through new eyes. And just like that, one pandemic has shone a very bright global light on another pandemic: inequality throughout the world. Racial injustice and inequality, and we've seen it through the Black Lives Matter movement. Racial stigmatization, for example, towards people of Asian appearance in particular due to COVID-19. Sexual discrimination, for example, the threatening of civil rights and human rights access to healthcare for LGBTQ plus communities in the USA, particularly transgender individuals. Now, these are just a few examples of the recent plights. Everywhere you turn, you're hearing human stories of literal, visceral trauma. Are these stories new? Absolutely not. This pain and suffering has been going on for countless years, hundreds of years in some instances. So what's the difference now? What's the new hope? What's the innovation that's driving this change? Now, I think this new hope is, in fact, the oppressed communities are beginning to share the burden of other oppressed communities. Individual stories of pain accumulating and being threaded together is fast becoming a tsunami of human emotion, and we're seeing that every day through the media. And with that building momentum, we're seeing change happen. We're slowly moving away from fighting our causes in silos to fighting together. Trauma, when shared, builds momentum, and momentum for the purposes of our collective human. A spirit of solidarity, inclusion, and acceptance across all who share in one common pain, the pain of inequality. And in sharing our human purpose and pain, we've begun to see the green shoots of success, and we've seen it in multiple countries. For example, the reshaping of points of view on Black Lives Matter from corporate and sports worlds. So we've looked at brands like the NFL and NASCAR, for example, pulling the Confederate flag. The police reform, particularly here in the United States, particularly against brutality against Black individuals and Black transgender individuals. The reshaping of education, we've seen the toppling of statues right through from Holland right through to here in the United States, where we're actually inherently romanticizing history about slave ownership. So all this diversity, when joined in a common fight towards acceptance and equality, gives birth to innovation. Innovation in the corporate world as more businesses commit to actually driving change by diversifying their leadership. Of course, we live to see this happen soon according to many corporate promises, but it's a start. We're moving in the right direction. The second point, innovation in traditionalists breaking ranks amongst the established to acknowledge human rights, for example, for the LGBTQ communities. The fight, of course, continues. Now, recalling the McKinsey research, it's important to note that as we continue to speak up as a community, the more positive change we will see in the workplace for LGBTQ plus communities. And it's only just the beginning. Diversity in all our individual pain and trauma can be the perfect catalyst for new hope, new ideas, and new change. The world would definitely be a much better place if you lived the purpose of your human. And with that, I want to thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Suresh, for your participation here. We do have a couple of questions for you. The first one I'm going to ask is really intense. It's pretty pretty personal, so just get ready. What is the name of your dog?
Finn. Well, he's dead asleep now.
Okay.
His name is Finn.
Okay.
And he's a gorgeous little fella.
And we do have one more. So you talked about the difficulties that LGBTQ employees have in the workplace. Who holds the responsibility to create a more equitable environment for them?
Leadership, 100%. And you know, and I think Stefan gave a really good example of how equality transcends right through a business when it starts right at the very top. If a company, and he talks about the SAP's logo, for example, and the very top could mean the actual business leaders, or the very top could mean the brand itself. And frankly, these two should be working in tandem. If the DNA of equality runs through the leadership and at the brand level, it actually permeates throughout the business, because that becomes the guiding principle and the rule of thumb. That's my 2 pence.
Thank you, Suresh, one last time for closing out LGBT Plus at Work 2020.
Thank you so much for having me.
When you're looking for career advice, it can be hard to know who to turn to. Many organizations and networks don't really care about you. You're just a statistic or a stereotype to them. You can find the help you need at MyGWork, the LGBT plus business community. We've seen discrimination in many workplaces, having even experienced it ourselves. So we understand what you may be going through, and we're doing something about it. Join MyGWork to find a job with an organisation you can be proud to work for. Connect and network with other LGBT plus professionals. Find a mentor and keep up to date with the latest LGBT plus news and events from all around the world. We've created a network that champions workplaces that are free from discrimination and allow you to be your true self. MyGWork, the LGBT plus business community. Work strong.
So one last thank you to our sponsors and our partners tonight. Thank you to all the individuals who helped make LGBT Plus at Work a success. And thank you especially to the speakers today that have contributed to the overall conference and for being change makers in the global corporate world.
Thank you to IE University and those a part of our team that have made LGBT Plus at Work a success for 14 years. A personal thank you to Eddie, the VP of Out and Allies, and without him, this conference would not have been a success. We thank all those that have watched today and invite you to join us tomorrow, July 2nd, at the same time, 6 to 8 p.m. CET time. We also want to let you know that there is an option for you to upload your CVs online, just in our menu bar, which will go personally to our sponsors. Again, we thank you so much for your participation and look forward to seeing you tomorrow.